Hello, everyone. This is, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dangerous Art Endangered Artists 2-Day Summit. My name is Anne Verhallen. I'm one of the co-founders of Art at a Time Like This, and I will be your MC this evening. Together with Barbara Pollock, I founded Art at a Time Like This to create platforms for artists in response to current social and political events. We believe that artists and curators can be seen as thought leaders, using their creativity to imagine alternative futures. Over the past 4 years of our existence, we and our collaborating organization, Artists at Risk Connection, ARC, have seen the need for these platforms increase as the rise of censorship has become more and more prominent. ARC is an organization that safeguards the fundamental right to to artistic freedom of expression and ensures that artists and cultural professionals everywhere can live and work without fear by providing direct and tailored support in times of prosecution. This is our second collaboration with Artists at Risk Connection, and we are really honored to work with them again for this very special project, as they've been such an invaluable partner to us as a leading human rights organization. Dangerous Art Endangered Artists will present several panel discussions and events highlighting the rise of censorship globally and here in the United States. Subjects such as self-censorship, institutional repression, new ways of censorship, social media and cancel culture, and new forms of gatekeepers are all up for debate. For more information about this program and about our speakers for today, you can see the programs that were distributed earlier this evening. Art at a Time Like This thanks the New York State Council, the Glenn Mead Trust Company, and the Catherine Family Foundation to support this project. Artists at Risk Connection thanks the Andrew Mellon Foundation, the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation, and the Open Society Foundation for their support in making this event come to realization. We highly encourage respectful discussions and encourage you to join the conversation after each panel with your questions and your thoughts. Our motto is to encourage dialogue, not divisiveness, and we hope that we can embrace each other's points of views. Now, it is a really great honor for me to introduce our very first event, Challenges Facing Artists, Authoritarian Regimes, with someone who really needs no introduction, Shirin Neshat. Shirin Neshat is one of the most famous artists in the world and leading advocate for human rights. Neshat is an Iranian artist and filmmaker based in New York City whose artwork centers on the cultural contrast between Islam and the West, femininity and masculinity, public life and private life, antiquity and modernity, and bridges the spaces in between these subjects. Since the Islamic Revolution, she has said that she has gravitated towards making art that concerns tyranny, dictatorship, oppression, and political injustice. Shirin recently was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Infinity Award from the International Center for Photography. In addition to her photographs, Neshat has directed 3 feature-length films, Women Without Men in 2009, which received the Silver Lion Award for Best Director at the 66th Venice Biennial Film Festival, Looking for Hum in 2017, and most recently, Land of Dreams, which premiered in the Venice Film Festival in 2021. Shirin will be joined by ARC's Julie Trebault. Julie is the director of Artists at Risk Connection. Before ARC, she served as the director of public programs at the Museum of the City of New York and the Center for Architecture. Before moving to New York, she worked at the National Museum of Ethnology in the Netherlands, where she built a network of museums, of 116 museums. From 2004 to 2007, she was the head of higher education and academic events at Musée du Grand Lit in Paris. After Julie and Shirin's conversation, we'll give the floor to you guys. So think of some questions for the ladies, and I hope that you guys can join the conversation. Give it up to Shirin, to Shirin and Julie.
Hi everyone, Good afternoon. We are really thrilled to be with you today and to have Shirin with us. So, without further ado, Shirin, thank you so much, and let's have a conversation together.
Well, first of all, I'm really honored. Is there an echo? Okay, I'm really happy to be part of the opening of this conference, which it's sort of hard to tackle. And I've been trying to think about what I can bring to this subject. And I just put down a few notes that I wanted to share with you, with all of you. You have to consider I'm an Iranian, and I think fear has been a deep part of being an Iranian, regardless of what generation you have lived. So our narrative as people has been that I don't think in any modern contemporary time we have lived in a period where there has been a freedom of expression or there has been no censorship. And I was born during the monarchy of the Pahlavi Shah, raised in a small conservative religious town. At the time that the Shah's ruling brought Savak, which is equivalent to the KGB, the secret police. And all I remember, all of my childhood, was that we were inundated with fear of surveillance as young people, especially as students. And at that time, they were concerned about communism. And as we had the Tudeh party, which was a large communist party that was against the Shah. And we kept hearing stories about prisons and young students' nails being pulled and all kinds of tortures and reminder of not ever becoming politically active. But I also remember how, as a young girl, we were always obligated to put a photograph of the Shah in the house, big one, because it was almost sacrilegious to live in a house without his picture. And that many of us thought and were told that members of our family and friends were in fact spies for the Savak. And so we didn't know who we were hosting might be in fact reporting on us. And so this was our psyche. And I remember also this was the time that Khomeini began to become a figure and sending his speeches through cassettes from Iraq. And me and my generation of friends were secretly listening to his speeches, which was the underground of the Islamic Revolution. Fast forward in 1979, we had the bloody, violent revolution by Khomeini that basically, perhaps it's one of the most brutal events in Iranian history, where the government basically massacred and executed huge number of students and protesters without any trial. But this time, they were after Mujahideen, which were the Marxist militant Islamic group that were opposing the government. And I remember thousands of young people in the 1980s, from 16 years old to 25 years old, by the thousands being executed and mass graved. And anyone who would be openly a mujahid would be executed immediately. This was our mindset as people. Of course, this government began to control and surveil the people, our freedom for the woman, obviously, as you know, the public lives of people, including drinking, parties, etc. I don't need to emphasize that. As you know, so many people have been arrested simply for having a party. But now I wanted to mention how this impacted the artists of Iran since the Iranian Revolution, which is over 45 years. All books, music, theater, screenplays, every artwork that was going to be exhibited in public had to go through the process of a permission from the Department of Censorship, basically. and very difficult to get anything past them if it didn't, fit the rules and the codes. So then the artists had to face the reality of, do they stop being an artist, or do they make work that sort of fits the codes? Do they leave? How do they leave? Fast forward Women, Life, Freedom a year ago. It was really one of the most euphoric and pivotal movements in Iranian modern history, and a chance for a transformation in Iran. Many artists, actors, filmmakers, including Tumaj, who is an incredible rap singer who you may have heard. He's now condemned to be executed for the songs he wrote. Shervin Hajipour, whose song became like a national anthem for the Women, Life, Freedom. Many filmmakers, Jafar Panahi, Mohammad Rasulov, a number of people went to prison because they protested against the way that the government was treating people. Most recently, you have Mohammad Rasulov, whose film just opened at Cannes Film Festival, but he was condemned to 8 years of prison and I don't know how many floggings. And so he fled Iran on foot, and he managed to show his film, which is very critical of the government. So this kind of gives you the picture of the country that I come from, and the prices that the people and the artists have to pay in the absence of freedom of expression. My story is that I came to this country when my father was worried about people like me in the age of 17 becoming a political activist and getting killed. And so, but soon after I arrived was the Iranian Revolution, so I didn't see my country and my family for about 11 years. So the initial consequence of this kind of the emotional, political, moral, and psychological consequence of political reality for me was nothing that I did was to do with the country. But then I became an artist, and then it became very personal. And for some of you who may not know my history as an artist, I had no interest in becoming an artist. I decided to abandon art. So my only reason for making art again was when I returned to Iran after 11 years and witnessed this incredible transformation from the country I knew to the current one, and obsessively researching and trying to make a body of work that basically raised questions and framed issues that I found were critical and paradoxical in terms of what had transpired. So therefore, I created a body of work called Women of Allah as my first body of work, that were never really meaning to provide any answers, but simply framing questions that was obviously in relation to women that became voluntarily militant during the Islamic Revolution. Well, this work went on to be extremely controversial. I became blacklisted, and once again, I couldn't go back to Iran since 1996. But the controversy didn't remain only with the country or the government of Iran, but some of the Iranian people who were questioning my point of view, whether there was a point of view, whether I was endorsing the regime or criticizing. Many of them despised the government. Many Western critics, academics to this day, questioned my character and my authenticity and honesty in terms of why I made this work, whether it was a career move to sort of sensationalize violence, and sort of many have attacked me as orientalizing the subject of women in Islam, and which became totally irrelevant to what I initially did. I so desperately wanted to maintain a relationship with my home. My latest body of work, The Fury, which it was another very political work, which was about sexual exploitation of women in Iranian prison, but it was actually made before Women, Life, Freedom. but many people rushed to attack me, including the government and other Iranian community, as if that I was being very opportunistic. I had death threats, and even the gallery that represented my work was threatened. And the social media just exploded, and even the academics in America attacked me and called me an Orientalist. So what I'm trying to go with this narrative is that it's very complex to be who I am, and many artists such as myself, where we come from is absolutely a dictatorship. But the risk and the emotional consequences, political, moral, artistic consequences, are not only imposed by our government, but by our communities, intellectual community, academic community, the artistic community. I would like to come back to Julie with this question of, where does the quality of the work stand versus the place where we stand as people? And I talked with Julie about how I see activism and how I see being an artist. I am an activist at times, and I have been very much in the forefront. But I find that activism is something that you clearly distinguish between good and evil, where in art, you don't do that. You don't decide for people who is good and who is evil. You give the mercy to the audience to decide for themselves. This neutrality and this lack of clear point of view, it's very upsetting for many people who would like you to be very clear about what is your point of view and who you call evil and who is good. And that often gets the artists in trouble. And the very last thing I want to say before we open the conversation, this subject is beyond, obviously, Iran. It's in many countries, particularly in the Middle East, in Egypt, all over. And that sometimes we are censored not only by our countries, but by the Western culture, as you know very much. And then, of course, we touch on issues that have been brought up by the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and some of the censorship that we have seen in countries like in Germany, that you can't even wear a keffiyeh, or you can't even participate in a pro-Palestinian protest. So I'm sorry if I talked too long, but I needed to share with you these very important points that are important for me and for your understanding of where I stand. And I welcome you to ask me questions or have a conversation.
Thank you, Shirin. Thank you very much for providing, like the context and framing. You touched on the transformation of Iran, like, growing up in Iran in the 60s, being here, studying in the US in the 70s, right before the revolution in 79. So there's a lot of transformation happening there while you were, in your youth as an artist, as a person living outside of the country. So I would love to know, like, how did witnessing the transformation of your homeland have shaped your artistic journey? How is it intertwining with,
I think that, as you know, I was outside alone without my family for those 11 years, so it was all news to me. But once I was able to go back, and I went back several times, again, not as an artistic move, but a personal curiosity, this shift from Persian culture to the Islamic identity, this identity conflict of Iranians, it's really central to our understanding of the amount of pain that Iranian people have undergone. And this was something that I was very interested in. I mean, just to be very honest, I didn't even recognize my mother and sisters when I went back, because all I remember, they were always very cosmopolitan and very fashionable, and mini skirts and whatever European outfits. And now they were draped in the hijab, and they had gone under so much pain because not only the revolution, but the war with Iraq, which they lost so much, and and their bombing that happened constantly, and the oppression that they were living under, the last thing they cared was fashion and how they looked. But both on a visual and social level, it was so shocking to see how a culture had transformed so deeply that even the people didn't realize it, but only someone like myself coming from the outside. So this led to the work that I made. And if you really understand the work and look carefully, it constantly goes back and forth between ideas and that comes are rooted in our Islamic tradition, the use of script over the image that is obviously coming from the mosque, the architecture, or the manuscripts, the Quranic text, but also the Persian paintings and how text and image are always integrated. So by bringing influences from both past and the present, I was trying to convey within a contemporary faces, I was trying to hint at this identity conflict, and by using music and poetry of Hafiz, Ferdowsi, Khayyam, to contemporary poets, Furugh Farrokhzad, to people who are living today, hinting at a history of mystics and poets that were ancient Persian to a contemporary reality of poets who wrote and give a narrative of a very different life. So my work, in my mind, is an embodiment of the past and the present of Iran and the very identity conflict that I saw so clear, again, through an artistic gaze, And this, of course, is not very clear to many people, but that was my intention.
Yeah, thank you. I think you touch on, of course, the 2022 protest after the killing of Masha Amini, and arguably, which was the highest moment after the revolution in terms of upheaval in the country, as we are all witnessing what's going on in the Middle East with a devastating war in Gaza. I would like to kind of hear your thoughts on, like, what is the role of art and artists, playing in this, like, phase of the social and political movement that are happening, and not only in the Middle East, to be honest. For working internationally in so many different countries, we are seeing those movements bringing a bit in different moments of time. So.
That's an excellent question. For a country that gives no freedom of expression, has a huge amount of censorship and zero support, the cultural climate is so extremely vital and alive. And it's really amazing how subversive and creative Iranian artists have become, despite the parameters and the boundaries. And it was so shocking to me that in the Women, Life, Freedom that lasted at least a year, and maybe it's continuing, who became very central were the artists. Shervin Hajipour, his song exploded. Artists in Iran, students of art, did these amazing performances. Actors went protesting, filmmakers went protesting. There was this incredible sense of solidarity, and the media, mainly Iranian media working outside, went after the artists, being the speakers and the voices of the people, which I found very odd. And they even asked me, who's on the outside, to be very vocal. And so it's really a testimony how the artists of Iran have been so pivotal as the people who speak about the people, but to the people. They are the reporters of the Iranian narrative to the outside world in film festivals, through books, through songs, and that they're the transmitters. And the people Iran who never have access to galleries or museums or movie theaters so much, they understand the value of the artist. And that is something that I think we underestimate in the West. With all the freedom of expression, all the freedom that we're given, we don't play as great of a role. And I consider myself American as much as Iranian. So it was shockingly fascinating to see, are the artists who are becoming, are condemned to be executed, are the ones who are being tortured, are the ones who are forbidden to make films and to leave the country and are in prison. And myself, probably, I would end up in prison, and that I'm not able to see my family or my mother who's on her deathbed because of the art that I made, which is not even that critical. So the artists are extremely critical, but also they pay an incredible price for what they're doing.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. And it's something that we are witnessing with the Artists at Risk Connection from the very, very beginning in 2017 when we started helping, supporting artists around the world. It has been steady number of 30% of artists contacting us are coming from Iran. And despite all the crises we have seen in the world, this is an extremely difficult environment where, backlashes, as you were saying, are coming not only from the government, coming from the community, from multiple layers. I want to go back to your work, The Furry, which is a very highly evocative political work on the issue of sexual violence and oppression by the government of Iran and the struggle of immigrant women of color in the US, like recognizing the potent role of art and in envisioning new future. What kind of art do you hope to create or are currently creating that kind of imagine a kind of post-authoritarian Iran?
First of all, I make it very clear that I never make work about Iran. I don't live in Iran. I'm not the speaker for Iranian women. I've never claimed to make any work that has anything to do with truth, but a fiction. And it's always inspired by my own personal circumstances. And sexual exploitation is a subject that is very important to me as a woman. I have myself, at some point in my life, have been exploited, and I think most women have, and they never speak about it. But I was following the trial of, I told you that the government executed over 3,000 mujahideen and women and men. And I was following, just curiosity, the trial of this notorious prosecutor who was responsible for these executions. And I became obsessed with the mindset of those who are raped and sexually exploited and how they never really recover from the trauma and they never become whole again. Even if they're removed from prison or they're free, many of them commit suicide. And so, of course, it was a reference to Iran, but it was a reference to any country, any institution, any government that allows its men in uniform to abuse power and take advantage of the woman. And of course, I made a film that is highly stylized. It's a video, and it is very psychological. But there are men in uniform. And like I said, it was very ambiguous, very poetic, and extremely conceptual. But it was meant to convey the emotional, psychological state of a woman that has been raped and is surrounded by the male gaze. But ultimately, she finds peace within the solidarity and expression of empathy of people who don't even know her, who are not from where she comes from. I live in Bushwick in Brooklyn, and the people in this video were my community of friends, Black, Hispanic, white, friends who agreed to be in it. And that it was absolutely important for me to say that I'm no longer just an Iranian, but I'm also American. And if something happened to me, there is that sense of empathy that all of us have for others who are in pain. Like I have for the people in Palestine. I have for anyone who's been traumatized. So this video was, in a very conceptual way, of course, shed light on the sexual exploitation, but there was something optimistic and hopeful about the fact that when people see others traumatized and in pain, naturally, instinctively, we want to help them. That's human nature. It's beyond where you are from. And of course, I was attacked later by critics saying that, no, I was instrumentalizing some of the people who are not Iranian to further serve my purpose. But this is the community I live with, and the people who actually played and danced in this video were my friends. And so the latest work I do is bringing my story as an immigrant to my backyard, you know, and being very personal about it.
Thank you, Shirin. It's a perfect segue to talk a bit of what's going on here. Like, as you say, I'm an American too, and I feel like a New Yorker too, and we are a couple of months before a major election. And I would like to hear your thoughts on, you know, like for artists who are residing in Western country, in freer country than other country, what they should, you know, kind of be aware of threats, because you mentioned, you rightly mentioned, you know, like some backlashes you receive here in the US. So what are kind of like the new threats on artistic freedom here also in the US that we should all be aware and kind of uphold artistic freedom also in our country?
I think it's a very good question. I mean, look, artists can be wrong. Artists can be wrong in the way they frame a narrative or a story, but they shouldn't be assassinated. So, you know, the character assassination. We could be wrong the way we, but our intentions are good. And I think being critical is a good thing. Whether it's a political criticism in terms of you don't agree on someone's politics and you don't tolerate their view, or art historically you don't like the way they're going with their work. But I think discourse is really important. I mean, I've developed a very tough skin because I don't think there's been any party that hasn't attacked me. I mean, I've had people in conferences walking around with my name saying, don't listen to her, she's working for the government, to people saying, you know, that the government of Iran, who's not even allowing me to go back. So, I mean, the point is that when you're long enough in this business of art, you go back to your own character. Like, why am I making art? Who am I talking to? Why is it important? You know, who am I serving? Is it the collectors? Is it the museums? Is it the dealers? Is it the Iranian community? Is it the art historians? Is it above all of and above? But how to free yourself from the pressure of this kind of criticism, which is so natural. People should be critical, but to stay healthy in the way that you don't lose your way. I think that's the challenge. And I think I can be very honest with you that what has saved me along the way is that my work, it's very intimate, it's very personal. It's all about me. It's all about me. I'm always in every photograph, in every film, in every video you have seen. As long as I'm in that work, you cannot accuse me of being opportunistic. It is who I am. Maybe you don't like me. Maybe you don't like my work, but it is who I am. And that's fine. And I think that is the importance for an artist who's starting and will be facing the challenges to come, is the reality that you have to accept who you are, and that many people just won't like who you are. And I think that's okay. We have to tolerate that. And I think that's something that is extremely intimidating for young artists, but now I'm not a young artist, and I'm not going to retire. I'm going to keep the work I make.
Yes, we want you to continue to keep like that. Um, let's talk about your new film project. So we had a conversation, as you could hear from Shirin, prior. So Shirin, you're working on a new film project, and it's entitled "Do You Dare?" And the "you" is a "you," the later. So the name certainly invoked the idea of revolting against repression, and the "you" references on the kind of social media lingo, if I may say. Can you tell us what inspired you to explore the theme of technology and its relationship to power? Sorry.
It's very difficult for me to explain the new work, but I wanted, if the Fury was about a woman who was incarcerated, therefore was devoid of an agency to defend herself and protect herself and express her rage, I wanted to make now a video that unleashed the rage of a woman against the establishment, against every evil. And this comes from me. I'm enraged because my mother is dying and I can't go see her. I'm enraged because I haven't seen my family. I'm enraged because basic rights are taken away from me of not going home. I'm enraged by so many things, so many people of Iran. So how do we deal with this rage in a work of art? And so I made, and I'm not going to go into it because I'm kind of embarrassed because I haven't even edited it, but it is a story about those of us who feel very free in the realm of social media, and we feel this extreme confidence to express ourselves and really have an alter ego. We become a different persona. But in reality, we shield that. We are very afraid and we're concealed. And I am following the story of a woman from Iran who basically died because she was censored by YouTube, and she had made these incredible videos that YouTube found problematic, so they took it off the air, and she was suffering probably from mental illness, but this was her only way of having a relationship with the world and a community, because she was a complete loner. She probably was autistic, nobody knew. And she took weapons and went to YouTube, and ultimately she tried to kill people there, but she shot herself and died. This is not exactly about her, but it is an inspiration about people who live in the border of sanity and insanity. Um, that people who live with so much emotions of anger. She was a refugee, and she was a Baha'i, which is a minority religion, so the government of Iran executes so many of them. So she was dealing with the kind of fascism both from the East and the West, the corporation of YouTube that censored her. And so I wanted to talk about the universality of fascism, the universality of abuse of power, whether it's corporate, religious, or political, and how a single woman can attack in a very surreal, unbelievable, and fake way. I won't tell you the rest of the story.
But it's a great teaser, and we wish you luck on the editing part because it's a mammoth work. We know that. Shirin, before opening the floor to questions, so get ready. My last question is: I know we have a lot of artists in the room, so what is your advice to fellow young artists, even not young artists, all artists? To kind of take a step up and, like not shying away of defending what they believe on, doing some controversial or irreverent work despite, the air du temps of who and what is sellable and, getting in. So I would love to hear your thoughts on how you navigate.
Well, I've been very lucky because my story as an artist is that I never wanted to be an artist and became an accident. and I'm very lucky. I'm an Iranian, and I've had some struggle and challenging life that has been my backbone in who I am as a character, and I've lived a tough life, but I never believe that you should make art for a career. I believe that it's absolutely a false start. And I think that if anyone approaches making art for climbing ladders, you're already on the wrong path. And that I think that we have to think about the stories we're trying to tell. How compelling are they? Why should people stop and listen or watch it? We have to be very serious about the quality of the work. And I think the other most important thing that has saved my ass has been my community. I have huge community of Iranian friends and collaborators who have been my supports, and at good times and bad times. Like me, most of them are exilic and carry their own baggage, and they do their own work. But it's so important to have community, and it's so important to have a distance from the art world. It's so important to be connected to reality of everyday world and political reality, life. And don't disconnect from the world and live in a bubble. Even if you're not making politically charged work, it's important to be conscientious about the world. And you know, I always say, you know, in my case, it was like people who said, what do you say? You're not even in Iran, and you shouldn't even be making work that is about Iran. And I say, you know, you can take an Iranian out of Iran, but you can never take Iran out of an Iranian. And so I think it comes back to your character and integrity as a human being. Why you're an artist? What is it that you have to say? And accept the failures. Accept that you definitely will make really mediocre and bad work. And I've made many, and I'm proud of the process, and I'm embarrassed by it. And it's like I'm full of flaws in every way, in who I am as a person, as a work, as an artist. And I think accepting our flaws as human beings I think is the best thing. And so I think as an artist, accept your vulnerability and your humanity as an asset, and be compassionate to other people and understand you are not the center of the world.
Thank you very much, Shirin. A big round of applause. Does anyone have a question? Go. Oh, you will have to be not shy and come here. I'm so sorry.
So thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to hear from you and from you as well. And I wanted to say that one of the reasons that I feel so connected to your work is that there's an underlying and sometimes or oftentimes very overt spirituality that you have in your work. So I was wondering if you could talk about your connection to mysticism or how you view spirituality in your personal life or as a form of activism.
Thank you. That's something we didn't talk about. You know, as most of you know, poetry and history of mysticism is such a central part of the Iranian culture. Back in Rumi, Attar, and even contemporary poets. And I think Iranian people are some of the most poetic people because the language of allegory and metaphoric is the way that we can say everything that we're not allowed to say overtly, in a way. And I think that's very difficult sometimes for Western people to understand why we use so much metaphors. And I think also poetry is the way that you can make art that transcends the specificities of a culture. There's so much poetry every day around us. I walk every day. I can tell you so many moments every day. I see small things that are so beautiful and so poetic in the subway, in the street, everywhere. And I thank God for it because it nurtures me. And when I make work that offers that kind of experience for someone, that although the work is so politically charged, it mesmerizes or invites the audience to go to a different place, to not ghettoize the work to just Iranian, Islamic, whatever, but emotions, the humanity, really. So I think, if you look at Iranian cinema, a lot of Iranian artists' work are deeply poetic. It's partially because it's ingrained in who we are, and partially it's a device to deal with censorship. Because the government, as smart as they are, sometimes they can't detect conceptual approach, allegorical language, and for me, even though I live here, I think I'm a poet. And that's why I have a hard time being overly didactic, overly obvious with my subject matter. And maybe that's too enigmatic for a lot of people. But that it's rooted in the language of poetry, I think.
Thank you, Shirin. Can you come up? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. It was such a pleasure hearing your story. You are just so bold and so mighty, and I think that that is important, not just as a woman, but just as a person, to stand up for what you believe in and stand strong in what you believe in. So my question for you, as I was reading the program, was that after you returned home from being gone for 12 years and not being able to go back, did you feel some sense of identity displacement because you left your family, your culture, your language, and everything you knew back home, but then when you got back home, home was no longer home. So did that leave you? And you hearing a lot of your story, you seem to be, holding on to what you know and what you know to be true and what you know to believe in. But for me, I'm just thinking like how much of a shock to your identity was that to go home and say, you know what, this is what I have longed to be, but when you get there, it's totally different. It's not the home that you know. Did that leave you somewhat conflicted in your identity? That is the question I have for you.
That's an excellent question. Yes, and I feel like even today when I'm surrounded by a lot of Iranian people, I feel different. And when I'm among Americans, I feel another, And I think this is the reality of someone like myself, that even when I meet my family somewhere in the world, I always feel like I'm different than them. And as much as I try to assimilate, I call my mother every day at 8 a.m. for the past, I don't know how many years. I speak with Iran every day. But there's always this gap because they don't know where I am. They don't know what my life is like, and I don't know what their life is like. And it's too painful to talk about it. It's too painful to reconcile, 40-something years of separation. We just got used to it. We just got used to accepting that forever we'll be displaced. And that is the way it is. After I live here, I go to an African dance class. My community are a lot of African Americans. I have a lot of Hispanic friends in Bushwick. My community are now a lot of other minorities who also feel a certain amount of challenges like I have. So it's interesting because sometimes I feel I shot a movie in New Mexico where I spent a lot of time with Native Americans. And I felt that I actually had a lot more in common with them than the Iranian community in diaspora. You know what I'm saying? So it's very difficult to explain as you become so nomadic that you never complete you're not ever a whole in any given community. You're always in parts, and you just learn to adapt to it. And I think maybe my husband and my son are the only ones that I feel like really know me completely. You know, that I can be just totally myself. But thank you for your excellent question.
That was an amazing response.
Hi, how are you doing? Actually, I've been following you forever. I'm Egyptian, and since I had always your work in my studio. And talking about fear, I totally get it. I can compare the way I felt when I saw your work back in Cairo with all the events happening around, and now seeing your work, it's totally different feeling. The way I understand, I understand, perceive, feel, and engage with the work is totally different. That's not the question. My question is, I am an artist, and every time, talking about fear, every time I have my brushes and I have a subject matter in my mind, and I start diving in, this kind of fear, it's like an open cage for a bird that is not sure if they can just get out. I always have this fear. Did you overcome that fear at any point in your career?
It's really, now we're becoming very intimate. Um, but I have for years and years suffered from anxiety. And I remember in school, in Iran, they put me on a boarding school that I became super anorexic and ill and because of anxiety. And eventually when I came alone to US and the doors came down between US and Iran, I was inundated with fear because not only I didn't have economic help, but I literally at the age of 18, I lost all my family. So this extreme anxiety just went to the roof. And to this day, I manage. And my husband always says, I'm so glad you're an artist because that's how you deal with your anxiety. I'm afraid of the immigration officer. I'm afraid of police officers. I'm afraid of any person in uniform. I'm afraid of doctors. I'm afraid of so many things. I'm afraid of a phone call from Iran. I'm afraid of people hearing my conversation with my mother. I was interrogated in Iranian airport for hours with my child, and they were going to take me to prison. I was afraid. That fear never escaped me, and that's nothing comparing to what other Iranian people have gone through. People in Egypt, my friends in Egypt say anything they put in social media, they go to prison for. Mm-hmm. You know, we have been living under dictatorship that has trained us to be fearful. Yeah. And I'm afraid it's not easy to escape it, even when you're free. Yeah. So I do definitely suffer from anxiety, and that's a part of who I am. It's like a mental illness, but it's okay. It's like a disorder, but I deal with it, and it shows up in my work, you know. Mm-hmm. So no, the fear has never left me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you really so much, Shirin, for being with us, for kicking this event together. It was an honor, and I hope the audience enjoy our conversation. And I would like to invite you to big round of applause for Shirin, and wishing you best of luck.
Thank you for being a great audience.